but we want to talk about the games first. And I think that the best way to start is that Miami comeback against Texas, where I think they were down something like 12 points with 13 minutes left. They were down 10, I think, with 8 minutes left, and then just went on a run. And this Miami team, once they started getting going downhill, this is a phenomenal, phenomenal basketball team.
Yeah, and it was stops that fueled that, Sam. It was their ability to really play in transition, where their speed and their ability to attack the basket allowed them to get easy buckets and crawl their way back in. Miami has not been a sensational defensive team throughout the entire season. They're a little bit smaller and undersized, but that's by design. That's how they want to play and space you out on offense. And they've got a big man in Norchad Omier who can bang with the bigger bodies down low because he has such a great motor and a strong frame, even though he's only about 6'7", maybe 6'8". But when they do defend, when they hit the glass really hard on the defensive side, or they're shooting passing lanes, they're gambling for steals, they put so much pressure on their opponent because they're going to generate good looks on the offensive end in the half court. But if they're getting easy ones and they're winning that transition battle, they're a really dangerous, dangerous team. And that's where I think they flipped the script today over those final 10 or 12 minutes. They started to get stops. They got steals. They got out in transition. They hit ahead. And that allowed them to just kind of settle in a little bit more in the half court and not really worry about where the shots were going to come from as much as they did in the first half. I mean, Texas putting up, 45, 47, whatever they did in the first half, inexcusable if you're Miami. They settled in, they defended, and that was the key to their comeback.
Yeah, it got super aggressive. This is a team that I think is much better when they play aggressive defensively. They are capable of doing that throughout large swaths of the game. And to be honest, I didn't even think they played horribly defensively in the first half. It's just that they have these little breakdowns that lead to easy shots more than anything else, it feels like. And those can be problematic throughout the course of a game. You look at the way their roster is built. They have a small backcourt with Isaiah Wong, who's just not an awesome defender, and Nigel Pack, who's 6 foot tall. And then you have a really good defensive wing in Jordan Miller. You have an incredibly athletic defensive wing in Wooga Poplar. And then you have a mobile big in Norchad Omier, who I think is actually pretty good at blitzing ball screens, hard hedging, being able to play flatter at the level, and then recovering back. The problem is they just don't have any rim protection, because that's the thing that Omier doesn't really do at the high major level. He was a great rim protector at the Sun Belt level last year, was not a great rim protector this year for Miami. That's okay. He crushes the glass and he's super mobile and does a lot of different things. He's an incredibly valuable player in college basketball. Yeah. Maybe, I think you can make a case, ended up being the most valuable transfer for any team this season, given the fact that he took Miami to the Final Four, right, as one of the best players on the team, certainly the third or fourth best player on the team, along with Nigel Pack. Tristan Newton would probably have something to say about that. Darion Trammell would probably have something to say about that, right? But nonetheless, you can work around Norchad Omier's weaknesses and his limitations, maybe in terms of size. The thing that really struck me about Miami today, though, was just how Jordan Miller continues to just step up in these big moments. I think Isaiah Wong was Miami's best player throughout the course of the full season. There's a reason he won ACC Player of the Year. There's a reason that he won all of the honors that he won this season. I believe he may have even been an All-American in some people's voting. I think that by the end of this season, Jordan Miller was probably Miami's best player. And I think he's emerged into becoming that. And today's game was the finality of that. He goes 7 for 7 from the field, 13 for 13 from three. My man went 20 for 20 today. That's unbelievable. He dropped 17 or 27 points. He played great defense today. Say whatever you want about how Miami struggled to get stops in the first half. That wasn't on him. He was phenomenally active on the defensive end today. I thought he was absolutely terrific across the board. This is the guy that I think has helped himself more than anybody throughout the NCAA tournament, just to get his name out there more in terms of being a potential pro and ending up as a potential NBA draft pick.
Look, we'll talk about roster construction, and within that conversation, I'm sure we'll have small anecdotes about culture and how that matters in this entire equation of what coaches are building, not just from a stylistic standpoint, but from a mental capability and durability standpoint. I think the
Yep.
greatest part about Jordan Miller is that he knows who he is. This
Yep.
is not a guy who's going to stand out a ton from a draft perspective or even in a lot of regular season games because he's the guy that shows up the hardest when it's just the dirty work that needs to get done. And he'll do it. And he
Yeah.
and Norchad Omier are both those kind of guys. Today, he didn't miss a shot. And obviously, that makes him stand out so much more from a stat sheet perspective. He's 27 points, got to the free throw line a ton, but he's always this active on defense. He's always this determined to grab extra possessions and rebounds where he can. He's always very smart about how he moves the ball versus how he attacks and gets downhill on the offensive end of the floor.
Yep.
He's a really, really good role player. And until Miami was going to get a national stage and have those moments where role players can make or break your season, and everybody got to see how rock solid he is day in and day out, of course he was going to be a little bit more of a sleeper. But he's been really good all season long.
Mark Schindler on the previous podcast told me he would have him in the 25 to 35 range.
Ooh.
That's aggressive, but I love it. I love Mark for coming with the takes. I said he was a two-way guy on that podcast on Saturday. I guess that was Friday night in the United States. Do you think that Jordan Miller is like a very real NBA draft prospect?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think that he's flirting with that top 60 for me right now. There are smaller things and areas that he's got to continue to improve at, but I think you said it earlier. Nobody has helped himself more this March than a guy like Jordan Miller.
Yeah. My thing is the shooting. Like, I don't really love the shot, if I'm being completely honest. He's going to have to continue to improve his confidence level as a shooter. It feels like he just isn't really willing to take them all the time, which in and of itself is a statement on his overall willingness to shoot, because he is left open long enough to be able to take those shots. The other guy that stood out for me today was just Wooga Poplar. And this is, to me, in that conversation with Mark, I also said that I think he is their best long-term prospect. He showed it today. I think he is a terrific athlete, a great defensive wing. He gets himself in there, rebounding the basketball. Just super, super athletic out in transition, a great running mate for guys like Nigel Pack and Isaiah Wong. I think that long-term, he's probably the best prospect on Miami, but he is coming of age right now at a perfect time for the Hurricanes, I think.
Yeah, and I love Norchad Omier. He's always been my guy just because I think his motor, his unwillingness to be denied from I'm just going to make a positive play to help my team. I don't care what it is. I'm going to find a way to do it. I'm going to bet on a guy like him to translate and carve out some sort of a pro career for himself. So I'm really high on him. This is a talented team, and they flew under the radar through a lot of the season because there was that perception the ACC was down and, they didn't have the strongest regular season. They dropped a couple games that they might, want to have back at this point. A lot of sophomores on this roster as opposed to those upperclassmen experienced guys that you can trust. But they're talented, they're decently deep, and they have an identity. They really space you out on the offensive end. And then Jim Larinaga is a fantastic coach because nobody enables his players to take control and ownership of the situation like he does. He's never rattled. He's always consistent and believes in his guys. And there's nobody, Jerome Tang had a fantastic season. And I think is built in a lot of that same way in terms of his mannerisms and belief in his team. But the way that Larinaga just never falters, only calls timeouts when it's time to make an adjustment, I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I agree. On the other side of this comeback here was Texas. And look, this Texas team is incredibly talented, just in terms of like older guys that can really play, right? They're deep with a lot of dudes. I think there's a really strong case that they win this game if Dylan Disu is healthy. Unfortunately, Disu did not play. And it came down to guys like Marcus Carr and Timmy Allen having to really be the dudes here. And they just couldn't get it done. And I think that, again, this is a team built on the transfer portal, right? Yep. Chris Beard, when he was the coach of Texas, brought in all of Timmy Allen, Christian Bishop, Tyrese Hunter, Marcus Carr, Sir'Jabari Rice, and then recruited Dylan Mitchell, right?
Mhm.
So, and Arterio Morris, I guess. So this is a team that is similarly built on the portal. And we should also mention, like, Jordan Miller is a second-year transfer in the way that some of these Texas guys are second-year transfers.
Yep.
Jordan Miller started at George Mason. So I think that what happened here ultimately, and it's a little bit disappointing for me to say this, is like, look, I've watched a lot of Rodney Terry teams at Fresno State when I was in Los Angeles, and then watched a decent amount of him at UTEP, because I don't know if people really recognize that, like, he had Bryson Williams, who was, an all Big 12 player last season on his teams there. He had Souley Boom on his teams there, a guy that was first team all Big East this year. Had a couple of other guys that went up to be high major players as well. And man, it really just felt like Rodney Terry's teams often kind of fell apart offensively more often than you would like to see for what the talent level was. And I think that's kind of what happened today. It felt like Texas did not get the right guys the ball in the right spots, and didn't really queue up the right sets to be able to withstand that Miami pressure defense. And because of that, they ended up going through these super long droughts throughout the course of the season. Look, if they want to hire Rodney Terry, I don't really have a problem with it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, this is a bit indicative of his past teams, is what I would say.
Sure. And Texas, for all the depth that they have, I don't think that there's ever been a clear alpha that's emerged for them on the offensive end throughout the year. Like, Marcus Carr has done it before when he was at Minnesota, and has been a takeover type of player in the past. But this team was much more predicated on just moving the ball, finding the right guy, not necessarily running a ton of intricate stuff, just believing that their depth and their overall athleticism was going to wear you down eventually, and they'd be able to create some easy buckets. But it's an identity problem in some regard. When things get tight and the game is on the line, do you know where and who, and who is going to create that offense for you down the stretch? And I don't think Texas really did tonight.